Welcome to the May Community IT Innovators webinar series. Thank you for joining us today for our review of the Microsoft Ignite conference. My name is Johan Hammerstrom, and I'm the president of Community IT. In case you're not familiar with Community IT, our skilled and certified team of IT professionals serves the greater Washington nonprofit community, helping organizations of all sizes and capacities to advance their mission to the effective use of technology. We're deeply invested in the nonprofit community, have served over 900 nonprofits since 1993, and we take a strategic and collaborative approach that fits the unique needs and culture of nonprofit organizations. As always, we encourage you to interact with us by asking questions via the GoToWebinar chat feature. You can also connect with us on Twitter. We can be followed at CommunityIT. It's our Twitter handle, and we'll be tweeting throughout the webinar today. Just a reminder, if you can, avoid multitasking during the webinar. You may just miss the best part. If you do happen to miss the best part, or you need to leave the webinar early, we will be posting links to the recording and the slides from today's webinar on our website, www.communityit.com. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, Matthew Eshelman and Steve Longenecker, to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about the Microsoft Ignite conference. Matt, Steve, good afternoon.
Thanks, Johan, for that great introduction. As you can see from my picture here, my name is Matt Eshelman. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. You can email me directly with any questions after the webinar, or you can also follow me on Twitter at MESHLEMAN.
And I'm Steve Longenecker, Director IT Consulting at Community IT, and you're welcome to email me as well. I got my Twitter going for Ignite, and I have not been too diligent about following up with it since then, so probably email is the best way to reach me going forward.
Great. Well, we have a lot to talk about today. The Microsoft Ignite conference was the first full week in May in Chicago, and it was a week packed of full of information. So our agenda for today, we will be talking about a little bit about the conference background, talking about the keynotes, then digging into some of the new products and services, and kind of sharing some overview and reflections about the conference. We only have an hour, and we already got some good questions from the registrants as you signed up. I do want to have this to be as interactive as possible, so go ahead and kind of keep chatting in your questions, and we'll take them as we come, and we'll try to keep this as conversational as possible. So as I mentioned, the conference was the first week in May in Chicago, and this was Microsoft's I think event to where they were trying to combine a bunch of smaller conferences into one big one. I think personally to compete with the things like Dreamforce, where there's a ton of people and it's a big exciting environment to be a part of. And so there were 23,000 people there at the conference. So it was a huge event. And then the day, the kickoff day on Monday was highlighted by keynotes. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, started off the day, and then they had announcements from all of the other big execs and VPs at Microsoft, and then the rest of the week was primarily focused on breakout sessions and the vendor hall. So starting off with that keynote, so Monday started off 9 a.m. right on the dot with a keynote from Satya Nadella, who really talked about the 3 strategies for the future of Microsoft. I think I'll let Steve talk a little bit more about those 3 strategies, and I think one of the things that was, I think, a unique takeaway for me is just how Microsoft views itself. So they view themselves as being, the only company that's uniquely qualified to care about you as the individual and you as the enterprise. So that was, I think, really interesting to hear that, kind of day one from the CEO to kind of talk about how Microsoft views itself as a company before sharing their kind of 3 top-level strategies for their goals.
So thanks, Matt. So Satya Nadella, I don't know, I feel like I should call him by his first name. Everyone else seemed to do that at the conference. Mentioned the 3 strategies, as Matt suggested. The first one was create more personal computing, And the way he described this, I think this meant, really being aware of the need to do mobile applications, supporting natural interactions. I'm sure people have heard about Cortana, their new speech interface where you can talk directly to your computer or mobile device with Windows 10. But also that the back end where Microsoft's cloud services need to be a trusted platform where you don't mind putting your personal data. So that's sort of prong one of this three-pronged strategy, and then the intelligent cloud backend would be a specific second prong. So they want to really use their cloud and machine learning of all the servers in their cloud and their data centers to enable scale that allows them to tailor their technology to work with all the data you're putting into it. So we'll talk about specifically ways that intelligent cloud backend will work later. And then finally, to reinvent productivity and business processes. And I think this is just a general way of describing the fact that they keep rolling out more and more new tools, and we'll talk about those as well. But things like Sway and Delve, OneNote is old now in some ways, but I mean they continue to really push it and try to make it more and more something that will be an important part of everyone's app universe.
Great. Then the next person that they had on stage was Joe Belfiore. He is the VP, I guess, of Windows. So there are a lot of demos around Windows 10, which will be, according to him, the operating system that you will love. And admittedly, it's, I think, a dramatic improvement from Windows 8.1. I have it running on preview in a few places. Basically, all the presenters were on Windows 10 for their computers. And there were some neat whiz-bang features that he showed in terms of picture face unlock, some really neat demos with Cortana, which is the Microsoft version of Siri, and just how their operating system works across devices. So a lot of this in the Microsoft world is kind of recognizing that work happens across multiple devices in multiple environments. So there were demos of what Microsoft Windows looks like on your phone, on your tablet, and then on your computer as well. So
I couldn't help noticing that every time something new comes out of Apple, it seems like they steal the best ideas from Windows and Android and wherever else. But vice versa. I mean, there's a lot of the stuff that is coming in Windows 10 that's like, hey, I see that in the Mac iOS world, and it's why not, But definitely some of those things like their continuity, I think, is something that Apple's been pushing for iOS and macOS devices.
Yep, and then so Windows 10, and then the other improvement was Windows Edge, which is the new internet browser. And they showed off some neat features like inline translation, so you could go to a website that was in Spanish and it would do inline translation to English or vice versa. And then also there's some real kind of neat collaboration features, kind of whiteboard, where you can do document markups on a web page and then save that and share it. So there's some neat things. I think a lot of the work is kind of under the hood. Then they talked, then transitioning over to Julia White, who is the head of the kind of the office and productivity side of things. So she showed off a lot around Delve, which is a feature. If you have Office 365 now, it's actually kind of a tile in your app pane, and it really builds off of what they would call the machine learning. So you can, for example, it highlights the relationships that you have between folks in your office, documents that you may be working on in collaboration, or documents that you may need to be working on in collaboration. And that was all done on a new device that Microsoft will be releasing, I think, towards the end of the year, called a Surface Hub, which is basically a gigantic, 4K, 84-inch flat panel TV that has computer built into it so that you can have meetings, and it's touch sensitive, and you can do documents and all kinds of interaction with the device. So I'm ready to get my credit card out and buy that one as soon as Johan lets me. But that was very very neat to see all of that in action.
Brad Anderson talked about a bunch of security stuff. He was on the stage for a long time, and I think it speaks in some ways to who the audience of who these 23,000 people were. I think Matt and I, in some ways, felt like black sheep there, representing generally smaller nonprofit organizations. There were a lot. This was a very enterprise-heavy present audience, and so I had lunch. I sat down for lunch at a table one day across from somebody, and I was talking to him, and he works at a place that has 18,000 seats, and he was just complaining about how small he felt there at this conference, where like lots and lots of organizations there had 20, 30,000 seats and more, and much more. But so Brad Anderson talked a lot about security, and of course that is an enterprise concern, and that's one of the things that Microsoft sort of can promise, that sure, there's all these cool consumer tools out there that everyone loves, but they don't have any enterprise controls. There's no way to keep track of your data, make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, and so forth and so on. And that's what Microsoft can deliver the same experience, the same productivity that these other tools can, but it can fit it into a larger structure that takes care of those enterprise needs for that kind of a thing. So Azure Active Directory Services, it's been around for a while, but they continue to improve it. He was showing off something called Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics, where at the touch of a couple of clicks, a couple buttons, you get lots of information about who's logging on where. Azure Rights Management, or Azure RMS, is a service that allows you, if you're using Azure Active Directory, to apply permissions directly to a file, and then the file actually gets encrypted, and the only way you can sort of decrypt that file is by sort of using Azure Active Directory for identity and authorization, so that the access to the file travels with the file, which is really great. You can email it even outside your organization, and no one can get to it if they haven't been authorized, and if they aren't getting credentialed by the Azure cloud. A lot of this was pretty cool, and I definitely could see that it might be stuff that a lot of our clients would be like, yeah, that's too much right now and expensive. It's not something that they are pricing for nonprofits at this point. But I do think it's the future. I do think that this is stuff that is going to, if not Microsoft's version, somebody's version of this is definitely going to just be necessary as security just continues to be an important thing for people.
I would say so Terry Myerson, talked about the new Windows update for business. So essentially there will be a kind of what they talk about, kind of concentric rings about updates. You'll be able to control a little bit more granularly about how Windows updates are received in the enterprise. I think for most small organizations, it's kind of the updates is either a set it and forget it internally, or it's handled through a management tool like we use for our clients. So that there may be some benefits in there, but I would say in general, I think Microsoft on the updates front, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but they are moving away from kind of big monolithic updates for kind of software and products, and towards more smaller kind of ready to go updates as they're available, both for security and and operating system and productivity software as well. So I think that was kind of continuing in the vein of more flexibility and kind of quicker, more granular updates as they are available. And then I really enjoyed Gurdeep Singh Paul in his talk. I think his title is like the VP of Information and Platform or something. But basically, he talked about I think how the change of pace in business is very rapid. There's an anecdote about how in the 1950s the average time for a company to be on the a company to be on the S&P 500 was 75 years, and now that time is now down to about 15 years, just kind of reflecting the pace of change. And my sense was Microsoft really is taking this very seriously and wants to change and adapt and be very nimble. And I think we've certainly seen it and felt it, that the kind of the change of pace that Microsoft has adopted over the last 12 months has really been accelerated, and I think they've structured themselves around being able to innovate a lot more quickly. And I think they have a lot of kind of research around that work habits of millennials. We heard that a few times about how we need to keep the millennials engaged as the baby boomers are retiring, and there's a new generation of workers that need to be engaged in their work. And so how can these technology tools be engaging for those individuals at their workplace? I think as folks in the nonprofit sector, I think we have a leg up in that we can, there's already a sense of engagement with the purpose and the mission of the organization, and to some extent, because we're smaller and more nimble, we can provide those technology tools to keep people engaged. So it was interesting to see that. The other kind of cheeky or throwaway line was around devices aren't mobile, people are mobile. People work from different locations, and so we need to have technology tools that enable that mobile work, and recognizing that the person is mobile in that scenario. So there's lots of tools that help to support that with with video now being available in Office 365, Skype for Business, new features in Office 2016 around document co-creation on the desktop. So there's a lot of work that's being invested in that area. And you can click on the link in the PowerPoint, and that takes you to the text of his speech, along with actually Julia's speech as well.
The afternoon keynote, we did this keynote lasted forever. It seemed like, it was really rich, but it just went on and on because there was so much they wanted to share. But so I think it was like 2.5 hours. Then we had lunch, and then there was after some breakout sessions in the afternoon. And at 4 or 5 o'clock, we went back for the afternoon keynote, which was focused on the Microsoft research work. And I don't have it in my notes here, but in my head, I have the memory that they said there were 10,000 Microsoft employees working in Microsoft research, which is their basic research wing, as opposed to applied research. So they're just looking at like big questions. Does that number sound right to you, Matt? 10,000 people? That's what I thought he said.
I think it was 1,000, but
1,000. Okay, well that's much more reasonable, but still a lot, and that's probably right. So he talked about the head of that unit talked about 3 problems that they were trying to solve, and he talked a little bit about how the fact that like today's solutions have their roots in basic research that Microsoft Research was doing 20 years ago, and he drew some lines between that. So his point is that Microsoft Research is right now thinking about the problems that will need to be solved 10, 15, 20 years from now. So there's problems that they're solving today, but there's also looking ahead. So there are 3 problems, and I can't resist this word that he used. I love it. The looming data apocalypse, which when I shared that with Johan, he just said, "Is this just another word for information overload?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's all it is." But it's an important issue. There's so much data coming. The amounts of terabytes and petabytes and whatever is just growing and growing, particularly with the Internet of Things. And so how do you process all that? And so they did some very neat like show and tells with data visualization and using graphs and graphs that are like instantly responsive to you moving touching it on the Microsoft Hub, and that was a very cool demo. Then they talked about the challenge of compute and the fact that Moore's law is essentially hitting the end of the line now. That the idea that processing power is doubling at a very quick rate, like every couple of years, that just is not sustainable, at least not with current technology. And so they are looking heavily, and by no means is Microsoft the only one doing this, at quantum computing. That was nice to hear. There wasn't much they could show. They had some pictures of some labs, but whatever. And then they showed off some of the machine learning stuff that they're doing with the Azure cloud, and they're already using machine learning for Delve and for some of the business BI, business BI stuff, and we'll talk about that later. But he was showing some of like the stuff that's down the road. There is some things everyone was looking at howold.net after this keynote, that you can go ahead and go to if you want to, and you can like put a picture of yourself in, and the machine will try to guess how old you are. I tried that and wasn't very impressed with how old it thought I was. It thinks I'm older than I am, so of course, what's wrong with that machine? But they did also show a video of a running dog, and how the computer was able to actually identify all the different elements of the picture. What was the dog? What was the background? What were the trees? What was the street? And to be able to do that with a moving video, it really is. It just knocks you out. The ambition that Microsoft has. It's a huge company. It can afford to be ambitious, but nonetheless, the fact that it is has a certain amount of impressiveness.
Yeah, and I think one of the neat things I saw as a follow-up on a practical use of howold.net was actually a homeless shelter, and I don't know where it was, but actually used howold.net as kind of a conversation starter to show, basically what happens, a 25-year-old homeless man, the system thinks he's 47 just because of the impact and that being homeless has on you physically. And so I think there are some ways that I think people are using some of this technology fairly creatively to address those issues. And I would say in terms of anything that felt like real innovation, one of the neat things that has actually been out for a while is the Skype Translate. So that's actually a feature now where you can talk in Skype in English, and that would be translated on the fly in real time into I think 10 or 11 languages right now, and that's growing. So I think that was an example of the investments that Microsoft and others have made in terms of natural language processing and really having the processing back end to do that real-time translation in the background. So a lot in the keynote, and actually for a lot of this, there's YouTube videos you can watch the whole thing live, and I think it was an interesting and inspiring event. So let's go jump right into some of the new products. Some of this we already mentioned, and I see there have been some questions in the chat, so we'll kind of go over that. So co-authoring in the desktop version of Office 2016. So Office 2016 is now in preview, so it's kind of available for early adopters, and so that will now bring that kind of simultaneous document editing right onto the desktop. Now that's a feature that you can do in the online app. So that's now going to come down to your desktop.
I think you have. I'm not sure of this. But do you have to have the cloud backend? I think you may need to.
Yes. I mean, all of this is kind of predicated. Again, I think Office 365 is really the cornerstone of their services strategy, and yeah, so a lot of this stuff is all built off of Office 365, and I'll kind of skip. I mean, universal apps, basically, the app will run in any container and be, kind of adaptively sized to whatever environments it's at. So I think that's interesting, and a way I think for Microsoft, I think they're recognizing to some extent they're kind of giving up on expecting everybody to have a Windows computer, Windows laptop, or a Windows tablet and a Windows phone, and making their applications available on any platform. So that's we've seen some of that, and this is the extension of that strategy. The couple of things, so Delve, Yammer, and Sway are newer products that are being rolled into Office 365. So Delve is built on what they call the Office Graph, which we'll talk about later, but it shows you relevant information based on who you are and who you work with. So for all the documents that are in Office 365, it will surface information that way. I find it very helpful in terms of finding out what documents I should be aware of based on my colleagues' work. Yammer is a product that Microsoft acquired and is a kind of the corporate version of Facebook. So in a lot of the sessions that we went to, Yammer was essentially where Microsoft staff start their day. So that's their kind of productivity tool as a way to move people away from email, which was another big theme, and a way to have an open communication was I think the theme around Yammer. And then Sway, is a kind of, not necessarily maybe a PowerPoint killer, but a new way to present information and data in a kind of visually engaging format. So it's free, so you can sign up now, and then it'll actually be included in your Office 365 subscription soon. So those are some of the big products, and then a neat app if you is Office Lens, and so that's a little app that works on your phone to do OCR and kind of picture resizing for receipts, or if there were in a lot of sessions people were taking pictures of the slides, and those folks that had Office Lens, it would automatically resize it, crop it. If it was off at an angle, it would make it square. So a pretty cool little application that's available. SQL Server 2016, I think that's really geared towards enterprise, and for them, Microsoft really is, I think, about the hybrid cloud. So if you have a SQL Server on-premise, SQL 2016 will allow you to extend, even at the table level, data back into the Azure data center. So you could have the transaction data that you're using actively on SQL in your office, and maybe that data that's a bit older, that gets pushed out into Azure. So all in all, there's lots of moving parts, and I would say, so a question about, does Yammer do away with the need for an intranet? I would say, yeah, it certainly could. Yammer is very kind of conversational and group oriented. There's a place to kind of put links and other info, so it's not kind of out of the box a snazzy intranet with a place for a bunch of shared calendars and all this other stuff. It really is for I think for kind of collaboration and working together on small groups, and then actually Yammer has the benefit of being able to be extended to include people outside the organization. So you could invite people to collaborate on documents that are stored in Yammer from that are not in your organization. So and I think to some extent that reflects Yammer was a standalone product that Microsoft has absorbed, and so they're kind of trying to juggle that integration, and so in a number of places there are kind of overlap. There's not just the one solution to do it all. There's a couple of different solutions that all can do similar things. So to some extent it's about finding the best fit for your organization.
Matt, we had a question on Twitter, and please ask your questions there if you like. It's about the Yammer Office 365 integration. Is that getting tighter? Did Microsoft speak to that at all at the Ignite conference?
Yes, they did. So there is single sign-on now between those two platforms. But as of now, the document stores are separate. So there's actually, you can store documents in Yammer, kind of self-contained, and Yammer has its own kind of little chat window, kind of in addition to Skype for Business. So I think what we heard is that Microsoft is keeping Yammer kind of as a standalone product, because I think there's a fair number of organizations that used Yammer before it was Microsoft, and so they may use Yammer but not all the Office 365 stuff, so they can't totally subsume it into the fold, but I think they are kind of working towards that way in terms of the integration.
All right, thank you.
Cool. That was a great question. I think a lot of and there were a lot of questions at the conference about how all this stuff fits together.
Sorry, Matt. Let me just add two quick things about that slide. The one was that it's just a throwaway thing, but I heard that at one of the sessions that Delve is like the ultimate demo app, that some engineers were trying to figure out how to use the Office graph, which is the back end, the machine learning where servers are analyzing all the different relationships between the Office 365 users of an organization. So how do you surface that for users? And so some engineers just threw together this demo to show off to the bigwigs, and the bigwigs were like, yes, that's what we want, let's do it, like we're doing that, like instead of it being like anyway, it turned into an actual product, which is kind of cool. And then I'll say about Sway, that we were going to do this demo in Sway, this presentation in Sway, because we thought that would be neat, and I spent a good 45 minutes on it before I gave up. It is very cool what it does. It is about half-baked, I would say. I'm sure it'll be fully baked. You know, Microsoft keeps working on things. I'm not trying to tell people not to use Sway or to check it out, but I don't think it is ready for prime time yet, or at least not for all purposes yet. But it's you know, it's a new product.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. There's a litany of new products and services, Steve. I don't know if there's any of these that are.
I just felt like I needed to list everything that we heard about, and it was somewhat arbitrary. Like SQL Server 2016 could have gone on this second list, so I just sort of threw the things on there. I think Exchange 2016 is interesting just because I don't think Microsoft's particularly interested in releasing software. New software versions of Exchange. I think they want everyone to get on their Office 365 Exchange servers, which will be improving, you know, all the time. They don't worry about they must have an internal versioning system, but it's not like Office 365 is going to move from Exchange 2013 to Exchange 2016. I mean, it's things are happening all the time on the back end to that, just like any other service is constantly improving. But they do have tons of enterprise customers, and they were at this conference, and so I'd be in a big room, and they would say, well, how many people have, you know, Exchange on premise still? And, you know, 3/4 of the hands would go up, and or someone would ask a question, like, well, you know, well, is this on? I don't like how this works or something. Well, are you on premise or are you in Office 365? On premise. Okay. Are you planning on moving to the cloud anytime soon? No way. You know, there's just like people, for various reasons, whether it's because they don't trust the cloud, they don't trust Microsoft's cloud, I don't know, but there is still a huge need for Microsoft to service either on-premise totally or hybrid, where there's an on-premise component. And in many ways, our clients are way ahead on that one because their size allows them to more nimbly move into the Office 365. That and the fact that Microsoft makes Office 365 available at charity pricing so generously.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else here needs to be, we don't necessarily need to spend time on. The Windows 10 biometric logon that you already mentioned, where, you know, if you have a Windows 10 laptop, you just, like, the camera sees you and then logs you in and knows who you are. That was one of the keynote demos. It was pretty impressive how he had like a blindfold over the it was very dramatic. You know, I have to have this. I have to have the webcam covered because see how fast he whips it off, and it's like within a second and a half. It's like, hello, Joe, you know, or something like that. So that was cool. But the rest of a lot of this other stuff was me just putting it on the list because we did hear about it.
Yeah, I would say you know, Skype for Business, you know, that's obviously been a big transition, moving from Link now to Skype for Business. So, you know, the logo that you see now, that's the, you know, the inverse of the Skype home user, or, you know, kind of personal edition. So that was released in April. Now Microsoft will actually be bringing calling, kind of direct dial calling to Skype for Business sometime in the second half of the year. So the technical details are basically all wrapped up. Went to a session about this. The biggest headache was around the 2,000 local taxation authorities that they have to deal with that govern telephony in the US. So that was actually the biggest challenge apparently. So the calling will be coming to Skype in the later half of the year. And it also means you'll be able to actually port your phone numbers into Skype and use everything through the Office 365 portal. So I think that could be big, for organizations, particularly with a lot of mobile staff, or as a way to kind of consolidate and streamline vendors. Phones are still important, but the need for a big on-premise PBX or even potentially another hosted voice over IP service might be lessened. If Microsoft can do it at a very competitive price. So that was a big deal. And then they also announced that they will be enabling broadcasting in Skype for Business up to 10,000 participants. So, who knows? In the future, we might be doing this event using Skype for Business and not have to pay for the GoToWebinar to do that broadcasting. So
if you're an Office 365 customer and you're looking for a new VoIP system, the message is hold off for 6 months if you can.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, in terms of a phone system, it will function just like a normal PBX with internal dialing and call center and all this other stuff. So, it looks like they had some fits and starts with it. They had a partner, they pulled it back. They've done. It's not been a clear roadmap, but now they are kind of on track to deliver this. So, SharePoint, Steve, do you want to?
I'll go with this quickly. I mean, SharePoint's a big thing for us at Community IT. We have a lot of our clients who have aging file servers, and they're like, do we replace the file server? Is the file share, that idea kind of dying? We know it is. We've had a lot of webinars on this subject, so it was a big point of interest for both Matt and I during the week of Ignite. We both went to a lot of different sessions on it, so there was a lot of learning. At the same time, I don't want to focus this webinar too much on that. I will say that there was some very, very interesting takeaways for me. One of them was that SharePoint really is about taxonomy and having sort of a structured way of organizing all data, but file data is included in that, and that would be what taxonomy is called. Folksonomy, though, is a new term to me, although I'm sure it's been around for a while. But there were definitely there was it wasn't a Microsoft person, but one of the presenters that both Matt and I actually went to this session, talked about folksonomy and indicated, and I think this was good for us to take into account. It's not like there's something wrong with folksonomy. The idea that you don't have to be so highly structured and top down with how data is organized. That some of that is obviously important, but that there particularly with smaller organizations and nimble, agile organizations, there's a lot of room for people to allow people to sort of put things kind of where they want to and label them how they want to, and trust that your scale is such that you can find them, and also that if you're using things like the machine learning and Delve, that it's possible that there'll be other ways to find things without all the structures of SharePoint. So that was an interesting counterpoint to sort of the push we've made in our direction with SharePoint so far with our clients. The rest of this, I think, is more details. If you guys have specific questions about these kind of questions, I'd say you can email me afterwards, and I'll be glad to engage in a conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I think a lot of folks in the audience, how many people are still using SharePoint 2003? A lot of hands, still up. So I think, SharePoint for us in the smaller nonprofit space, hey, SharePoint Online is a great option. We're not kind of burdened with a lot of legacy environments, and to some extent, we're able to take advantage of some of the new features without, these kind of big on-premise deployments kind of bogging things down.
There's a lot of legacy. The other thing, that third bullet point about hedging its bets on highly structured platforms, it was interesting in the keynote. There was quite a few demos that were like about Delve or others where they would refer to, well, what if you want to share a file with your colleague and you're worried about security? And they weren't focused on where the file was located. They were focused on whatever they were demoing. But always it seemed like they were talking about sharing the file from OneDrive, never from SharePoint, or it's in many ways Microsoft is hedging its bets, and SharePoint will be. I'm confident SharePoint's going to be around, and it's going to be an important part of the Microsoft playbook. And we'll talk about what to use when in a later slide. But they are admitting the fact that not everything fits in SharePoint with its high degree of structure and administration and management, and that there's a lot of room for just saving things and sharing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. So moving on to security, again, this was another big topic for us. Actually, before this event, I went to a security event kind of the day before this conference got started. So this is also high on our list and on the minds of a lot of our clients. The scary topic, that was a session I went to with two of the engineers from TrueSec. The last 7 minutes is particularly interesting. Talking about just how easy it is to kind of compromise and circumvent, on antivirus and kind of all these security measures. So, there's a lot of discussion around security and protection, and just kind of how to go about kind of good design. I think one of the key pieces around that is around, kind of last point is, encryption is coming, to Office 365 with SharePoint and, and Exchange for both sending encrypted messages and actually encrypting documents, in SharePoint themselves, so you can do a bit of control and permissions management for those documents, and kind of revoke access even after it's been granted. So. Yeah, I mean, security was a big topic. I think, again, I was kind of impressed by, maybe impressed or, I don't know, shocked at just how much of the enterprise IT world is focused on compliance and auditing and reporting, and there's a ton that's built into the platform to kind of support all of those requirements. So, Steve, I'm not sure if there were some other things, around security that were particularly, that you thought were particularly interesting or relevant.
No, I mean, I think you've hit the high points. I think the sense of it being overwhelming with that antivirus doesn't begin to sort of save us from the malware that's out there, and that there's a lot more that has to be done, and that it's tough for us to find that balance, as it is for everybody, between security and accessibility. But it's a balance we're going to have to continue to pursue finding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think as the top level sections, the vendor hall was actually a pretty significant portion of the conference itself. So, on the one side was, a dining room for 20,000 people, and, on the other side of the McCormick Place Convention Center was, an equally large space for a lot of the vendors. I mean, there were, I don't know, hundreds of vendors. I would say some of the highlights for me were just, an opportunity to check out a lot of the new devices that are coming out. So there was, lots of looking at new tablets. The Surface Pro 3 has recently been released, and so that was there, along with a lot of other vendors and their touchscreen, multi-screen, hybrid laptops. And as somebody who's in the market, it's good to kind of check out some of those new form factors. So it's pretty clear that kind of touch is here and here to stay on kind of any form factor, and so I got a chance to get my hands on that. The what is it? The Lenovo Yoga was pretty neat. The Surface Pro 3. There were definitely a lot of those in the audience. So I think that was a highlight. In terms of the vendors, I mean, it was, again, geared towards enterprise, so there were a ton of SharePoint management tools, like a ton. Workflow management, document management, migration.
And System Center management add-ons and so on. Yeah. A lot of stuff that wasn't relevant to us, for sure.
Yep. And then I'd say, a highlight, Thycotic is a vendor that we use to do privileged account management internally, and so they were there. They have a pretty strong presence for security, and so they were there, and it was great to see them and see kind of how their solution is being used to really provide some additional levels of security against some of the threats that we saw earlier that were identified in terms of some pretty sophisticated things, like pass the hash, hacking attempts as a way to circumvent security. So I would say that was some of the highlights for me. There a lot of big enterprise tools were there. All right. So, Steve, your reflections?
Sure. I'll take this slide. We have a bunch of reflection slides here, and we'll move through them. I think Matt and I were both impressed by Microsoft at this session, and I sort of came back almost apologizing to some of our colleagues here, because I want to, at the same time, they're very important to us and to our clients, in large part because of their generosity with the nonprofit community. But I also want to be aware that they're one of a universe of vendors that we want to support and make sure that we're always searching for the best fit for our clients, and not just necessarily what Microsoft is offering. Still in all, we were impressed, and they're huge. They're very international. There are people from Microsoft staffers from all over the world. The corporation itself is, I mentioned this before, how ambitious they are, how they really think that they can do, or want to do everything for the enterprise and even for the individual. And they're very talented, or they came off as, I would say, very smart people. Not how gender balanced they are. And there's a lot of other, class, social justice criticisms you could make, I suppose. It's a very guy-heavy conference in general, audience included. But this picture here I took of, I went to a session that was called Ask the Experts, and it was focused just on Outlook, OWA, or OWA, they call OWA for iOS and Android. Outlook for iOS and Android is actually both, and they bought two different things and named them two different, gave them different names, and then Outlook for Mac. Anyway, this is a group. Each of these guys is like a product manager that probably has a bunch of engineers and designers and so forth working for him. They're all hims. This represents hundreds of people. These are the top managers, and this is just one very not insignificant. I mean, Outlook's a big deal to Microsoft, but that's just one part of the Office suite. It's crazy. It's a huge thing. And just managing 23,000 people, I'm sure that was outsourced, but I was just impressed by how they fed us lunch. It's hard to do.
Yes. There were complaints about the food on the Yammer conference site, but yeah, again, I think overall, the logistics were done well, and yeah, I mean, feeding 20,000 people lunch in an hour and a half is a monumental accomplishment. So. Again, I think we mentioned this earlier, our clients, and I think the nonprofit sector in general is ahead of the curve in terms of cloud adoption than a lot of the enterprises. So, I think we aren't encumbered by, I think, a need to kind of hold on for job security. I think there was a certain amount of that. We don't, I was talking to a guy who managed a data center, and I was asking him, I was like, "Oh, are you transitioning things to the cloud?" And it's like, "Well, we'd like to, but I manage a data center, and I got to get the storage engineers on board, and the and then the VM guys on board, and then the server hardware guys on board, and then the network guys on board, and so there's a lot of kind of overhead and kind of structure to kind of deal with whenever organizations are looking at making the change. And so, I think in the nonprofit space, Office 365, the E1 licensing is free for qualifying nonprofits. The E3, which gives you a lot more bells and whistles, is $450. And so there's almost not much discussion when it comes to setting up a new email server or a new SharePoint server. Are you going to do it in-house in your office, or are you going to take advantage of the scale of Microsoft? So, so I think, the both adoption of the cloud, and I think, and that, kind of the comment about engaging millennial workers in terms of, having flexible workplace environment, and apparently the emoticons in Skype for Business is a way to engage millennials as well. So, they're doing what they can for that on that aspect. Again, I think the pace of innovation and development of Microsoft is pretty rapid. So, I think to some extent now, they're actually able to innovate faster than some of their, vendors that are tying in. So, they say they can kind of update their entire, Azure their Azure cloud, globally, millions of servers in like a 2-week period if they want to make changes, and so they are adopting quickly. And if you talk to some of the, all these SharePoint add-in vendors, they're updating on a much slower process because their development processes kind of haven't kept up. So, I think that innovation is pretty noticeable. I think to some extent they've adopted the kind of the Google mindset of rolling out features as they are ready, and that's, I think, a trend that we're going to continue to see. It's evidenced by the update for Windows, or the migration to Windows 10 is actually handled as a Windows update, and it looks like for a number of these systems, the next version of Office 2016, the next version of Exchange may be the next the last major version of software that we get as they move to a more of a continuous update cycle.
Kind of how
so
the way Google does Chrome. It just is constantly updating. You don't really notice.
Yeah, and I think that's why there's a lot of emphasis on getting people to move into the cloud or getting people to adopt the most recent versions of software, so that they can kind of enable this updating and continual updating process, and keep things moving along, because obviously they have a huge entrenched on-premise infrastructure, and they're trying to find ways to incent and get people to move and innovate and kind of get out of that big kind of static infrastructure into a system that can be improved and kind of capacity added as it's available. And again, Azure is growing dramatically. The Gartner report on cloud service vendors just came out. Amazon continues to be in the Magic Quadrant, with kind of capacity that far out exceeds anyone else, and Microsoft is kind of in second, farther behind, but since Azure wasn't even an offering 3 years ago, it's pretty amazing that they've gone from 0 to over 1 million servers and kind of being number 2 is I think a testament to their kind of commitment, innovation, and cash. I mean, it just takes an enormous amount of money to do it, and Microsoft has the money to do it. So.
And I think it's interesting also that in some ways Microsoft's strategy, you said about being number 2 to Amazon, in some ways Microsoft's strategy is to be number 2 in everything. Number 1 takes a lot of work, and maybe you get to be number 1 if you're number 1 in one thing like server operating systems or something. You can sort of pull people in with that. But if you're number 2 in everything, then it starts to be it's like, well, instead of trying to build best of breeds from all these different things and work with dealing with all the connections between these different systems, I could just do the Microsoft stack, and it would be number 2 in everything, but it would be easy. And I think that in some ways that is their approach, and it's not a bad one, particularly with the enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, again, there was an emphasis over again actually on implement only what's needed, which I thought was interesting. And then, Microsoft has done, I think, a good job of providing a lot of end user training. So there's success.microsoft.com that talks about adoption, and so there are a lot of training resources that are available now.
So utility and adoption of the newer tools like Delve and Yammer, we'll see. They are. It's part of Microsoft's strategy of being able to do everything. I'll sort of preempt a slide that's coming up very soon here. I guess the next slide. That with this Office graph idea, that if you're in the Office 365 cloud, they can use their machine learning algorithms and stuff to sort of track down what documents you're using, or if not just what you're using, but the people that you interact with the most, what they're using, and surface the ones that may seem to be related to you if you have permissions to see them. That's really cool. It works really well if you're doing all your work in Microsoft Office 365. If you're only using Office 365 for email and all your documents are being shared out of Dropbox, that's kind of invisible to the Office graph, to Microsoft's machine learning. So there is an incentive for Microsoft to get you to use their. They want sort of a certain degree of hegemony, and they're incenting you to sort of fall in line with that by making these tools work really well for you. I mean, it's an interesting bargain, but how Delve and Yammer and all those things fit together, we'll see. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So again, kind of coming into it, the big question we had, and we've seen it asked by folks here in the webinar is, when do we use what? There's like, a ton of different tools, and how do we figure that all out? And I went to a really great session that 2 guys did who have this website called whentousewhat.com, and there's a great 60-page document white paper that attempts to answer that question. And the answer is there's not one specific answer. It depends on your organization and your communication approach, and so there might be different tools and different approaches, based on your workflow. So it's not necessarily a binary decision of, should this go in, in a blocked email or Yammer, or do we only use one tool or another, or do we just use OneNote or OneDrive or Skype or SharePoint? But again, it's a process, and there's a lot of different tools that are available, and you can kind of talk through the different scenarios and answer that question of what might be the best use or the best tool for this scenario. So I would really encourage you to check out that link, register for the white paper, and I think you'll be seeing more of this type of conversation. I was very impressed with their approach, and I think it kind of nailed down a lot of things that I've been thinking about and considering in terms of answering that question, both internally and for the organizations that we work with. So Steve, I'll turn this over to you because I know this was one of your favorite takeaways.
The window pane rule, well, it's so appropriate for me to try to learn this, and I admit ahead of time I won't. The window pane rule was just a throwaway tip that someone gave, that if you're using Outlook and you're typing an email to somebody and what you've typed exceeds the space allowed in the preview pane, in other words, your text is starting to scroll up, it's time to stop and call them, whoever you're addressing that email to. So long-winded emails, not helping anybody. That's what the window pane rule is. The other thing, this was something that I know has been an issue for us in serving our clients that are having calendar syncing problems between multiple devices, especially iOS devices and laptops and Outlook for Mac and all of that. But even if you're using Outlook for Windows and a Windows phone, there's problems, and so that was raised with at the Ask the Experts panel that I went to, and they sort of admitted there was a problem. They said, step one is to make sure every last thing you're touching is upgraded to the very latest version, and step two is that only one, don't try to update too many things at once, and if you've updated it one place, leave it alone for at least 10 minutes or so to let it sync before you update it again somewhere else. And I know we have clients who don't follow those strict guidelines, and it's because you want it to work like magic, and it doesn't. So anyway, it was interesting watching people grill these experts. People had lots and lots of complaints. Why doesn't your software work perfectly? And I'm sort of saying that in a way that's defending Microsoft, but it's true. Everyone has, if you get a chance to talk to the people who are actually developing the software, you're like, well, why does Outlook do this, or why does OWA do that?
Yeah, it's good. One neat little takeaway that I found is that if you're in Office 365 already and you want to publish your calendars, say you're trying to schedule a meeting with somebody not in your organization, you can actually follow this link, and there's a step-by-step guide on how to publish your calendar information, either on a web page or as a iCal download. So that was neat. That was a cool little takeaway.
It does need to be allowed on the admin side, but I think it is by default.
Yep. So for example, now, I have my, free busy that I published out. So maybe I'll tweet that out. So if you want to schedule a meeting with me, you'll at least know when I'm free or not.
And I noted here that there's a bunch of tools for Excel that are coming. They're going to be included in Excel 2016, but they are already available for 2013 if you download the plugin or whatever from Microsoft. And they were all shown to me in various sessions, and I was impressed by them. I mean, just something to check out.
Yep. Great. Well, we still have. We'll try to wrap up here. We'll hang around for a little bit longer if there's questions. I do want to just highlight. So I'll be doing our next webinar, which will be Thursday, June 18th, where I will be doing a little bit more deep dive into some of the new technology that's coming out. So ideally, it'll be a real live demo using Windows 10, Office 2016, Skype for Business. So if you're interested in seeing some of that stuff, please be sure to sign up, and we'll do some live demos. Again, that was another thing. A lot of the sessions were not just kind of PowerPoint static presentations, but actually were live demos. And I would say for the in the vast majority of cases, stuff worked well and was very well done. So So that was another interesting takeaway, is that live demos, they can be done. Yep. So let's see. So please make sure to sign up. You're welcome to connect with us via all these different methods. If you also get a copy of the slide deck with the links, if they weren't working for you. But I'd encourage you to check out some of the links that were included in the presentation. They are very helpful. So again, if there's additional questions, Steve and I will hang out here for a little bit longer. If there's any questions, I don't know if there's, Johan, if there were any additional ones that we wanted to circle back and catch.
Yeah, there are a couple. We can continue on for a few more minutes. I will mention that the slides are not posted yet. We post the slides to SlideShare and the video recording to our YouTube channel, and those links are usually live by Monday. So, and we tweet that out, and that will be in the final email for anyone who registered for the event today. Yeah, we have a number of questions. There was a question: any news regarding the timing of releasing real multi-factor authentication or dual-factor authentication?
Yes. So multi-factor authentication is included in Azure Active Directory Premium. So that is an add-on in Office 365, and right now that is not available to nonprofits. There is no nonprofit pricing for that. So
it's available. You just
right.
You have to pay full freight.
Right. So, and I think the pricing is like $6 per account per month. So it's kind of expensive compared to some other tools. So for multi-factor authentication, I personally like Okta as a single sign-on with multi-factor authentication tool. It is Microsoft can do it, but the implementation is a bit more complicated, and it's more expensive right now.
The other question was around folksonomy. I think you mentioned that earlier, Steve. And is folksonomy, what was sort of the relationship between the talking about folksonomy and SharePoint Online? Is folksonomy a good approach for SharePoint Online? Was that kind of the position that they were taking, or what was sort of the context in which they were raising?
They were not at all advocating it as the best practice for SharePoint Online. I think it had more to do with the fact that you can choose like different degrees to which you want to be proscriptive as an organization about how files that are stored in SharePoint are tagged with metadata. You can sort of require that all files have a lot of tags that you have picked choices, and that the users really don't have any control. Or with a wide open folksonomy approach, you would just sort of say, hey, here's a library, store your files here. You can add metadata as you wish. Now the risk with adding metadata as you wish is that people might add, like, not even notice that there's a term called finance already existed that somebody else created, and so they save their spreadsheet to the server, and they give it the term budget. And in fact, for all practical purposes, even though there's nuances there, things get mixed up, and in the end of the day, finance and budget become almost analogous for each other, or at least there's huge degrees of overlap, and it becomes less efficient to find the right documents when you need to. And so there's definitely room for being proscriptive. I'd say that the position that I think we'll take with our clients that aren't the biggest clients in the world, certainly compared to these enterprises that we're going to these sessions with us, is that you want to have some prescription at the top levels of your structures. So if you're thinking about it like a file server, using that metaphor, your root. It would be actually somewhat similar to how people organize their file servers now. Usually on a file server share, the root and maybe the next level down is prescribed by sort of the organizing principles that have been laid out, the taxonomy that's been laid out by the organization. Don't add new folders to the root, please. Fit it in there somewhere. But once you get down a couple levels and you have a file that you don't know which folder to put it in, it doesn't seem like it's going to fit in any of those folders, you can add a new folder if you want to. And that would start being more what's called folksonomy. So I don't know if I answered the question entirely. I think it was more that this presenter was saying, look, don't think you have to be totally prescriptive. That may or may not fit a particular organization's culture.
And I would just say, in terms of how this relates to deciding, which tool to use, do I save it in OneNote or do I save it in SharePoint? I think the whole, kind of concept about enforced, kind of metadata and kind of document attributes, I think are one of those guiding principles. So if you're working on a document, what's the audience? Is it just you? Maybe a few other people are working on it. Hey, maybe OneDrive is going to be the perfect place to save that. Maybe you're working on maybe that budgeting spreadsheet. Maybe that's a big formal organizational document. It needs to have certain attributes applied to it. Maybe it needs to have certain compliance rules applied to it. Maybe there's encryption things that need to be applied to it. Then that may lend itself to being stored on the the SharePoint document library for finance. So that was, again, some of those tools to help make those decisions about which tool do I use and what are some of those decision points.
Or perhaps where in the life cycle the document is. While it's still a work in progress, while it's a grant application that's not yet ready, then it might be living in your OneDrive folder, and the people that are co-authoring it with you are shared it with you. But once it's been submitted and it's now something that needs to be, I wouldn't say archived, but it's done, it's sort of publishable, then maybe it goes into SharePoint. And there it needs to, there you want to use a taxonomy so that you don't lose track of it.
Great.
All right, Matt, Steve, thank you both very much. This was a great webinar, great summary of Ignite conference, and Matt, definitely looking forward to the deeper dive into Skype for Business, Windows 10 and Office 2016 next month. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and we hope you have a good rest of the evening. Take care.